talking all things theatre and events.
A really big thing that I've looked at recently is community engagement. So I come from a rural community.
And so I thought, well, do you know what? The baton was there and I picked it up and I've never looked back really.
I would love for large, well-known venues to programme more up-close sensory work.
The Stage Is Yours podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Stage Is Yours podcast. I'm your host Carl Graham, joined as always by producer Dan, and we're talking all things theatre and events. Today we're talking to Courtenay Johnson and Natalya Martin from Carbon Theatre. We get into all things Carbon Theatre and creating sensory theatre. We talk all about their latest project, My Sensory Adventure, and making accessible and inclusive theatre for everyone. Courtenay Johnson and Natalya Martin, the stage is yours. So today we're joined by Carbon Theatre. We're joined by Courtenay and Natalya from Carbon Theatre. So how are you guys?
Okay. Yeah.
Really well, thank you.
That's grand. So why don't you give us a little bit of an idea of what Carbon Theatre is? Because I can't say I'd heard a huge amount of the company until I started doing a little bit of digging and research.
Oh, that's good to know our marketing's working. I basically started Carbon 2.5 years ago now, I think. Yeah. It feels like less, but so I just moved back to the Midlands from London. I'd had a baby, quite a lot had changed. So starting Carbon Theatre was like a big kind of refresh for me. And I'm a creative producer, so it was a bit different as well, because I wasn't starting with a project or a company of actors or anything like that. It was just kind of me on my own, wanting to do new projects. Started off very much about elevating female stories. And then it's kind of developed in lots of wonderful ways just because of the amazing artists and creatives that I've started working with.
Amazing. That's great. So would you say Carbon kind of, obviously being called Carbon Theatre, it initially jumps to me as sustainability. So do you kind of have a set of key aspects and things that you kind of really try to focus on as Carbon? I know you've touched on kind of champion women's work and things there.
Yeah, so I mean, sustainability is a big thing for me and for the company, and I've got an Arts Council application in at the moment, which is quite a big one, that's focused on climate and making work about consumerism specifically, but also linked to motherhood and all of those kind of interconnecting things that we don't necessarily talk about in terms of sustainability. But yeah, that was an element. I mean, my background is actually in chemistry. I originally went to Edinburgh Uni to do chemistry, and there's something really beautiful about organic chemistry that and carbon is the backbone of that, and the whole reason we basically have life. So I thought it was a really meaningful name, but it also, it sounded nice.
Yeah. Absolutely. So just bring Natalya in here. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and obviously you are working with Carbon Theatre at the moment.
Yeah, so I've been working with Carbon and Courtenay for, I don't know how long it's been now. Has it been like 2 or 3 years? I think. Yeah. I started working with Courtenay on a project called Seagull, which I'm sure Courtenay will speak more about later on, which then developed into our current project, which is My Sensory Adventure. So I'm a sensory practitioner, mostly working in theatre, but working in all areas that are based around the community and community inclusion, and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's been really great working with Courtenay for such a long time. I can't believe it's been that long.
Yeah, it's crazy.
No, that's great, and that it's kind of developed through. That kind of brings us nicely into kind of a little bit more about what I talk about, and kind of what, when I started reaching out to different companies, what I was really looking for, which is kind of trying to make things as accessible as possible within theatre, because I think it's something we're all sort of aware of, but we don't necessarily talk about what is actually being done to kind of make things as accessible as possible. So obviously you've talked there that Natalya, you're a sensory advisor, which is great, and kind of bringing that into sensory practitioner. So I just wonder if you could kind of chat about the challenges you find making things as accessible as possible.
Yeah, sure. So it's sensory theatre is a fairly, I want to say it's fairly new, but then again, it isn't, because we all experience theatre through our senses anyway. But the way we work, words, but the way we make this type of sensory theatre is really specific to inclusion and accessibility. A lot of the work I do is for and with audiences with disabilities or complex needs. And I grew up as a sibling carer for my sister, who is autistic and has complex needs. So I've kind of been immersed in this world for as long as I've known. So accessibility has always been at the forefront of everything that I've experienced. And when I've done things or been to venues or been to shows and there hasn't been that level of accessibility where I think, oh, my sister could definitely come to this, and that's where the kind of problem lies, in my opinion. There's lots of challenges faced, and there's lots of different kind of areas of the challenges. So if you're talking about venues, there's so many challenges faced in terms of like physical accessibility, sensory accessibility, visual accessibility, toilets, and all of that kind of stuff, which I could talk on and on and on about, but I won't. But in terms of making work, it's really, really nice to start on a sensory base, because senses are something that we can all engage with, and there's no language, or we don't have to verbalize things, and we can all, it's accessible for everyone, if that makes sense. Your kind of traditional theatre, there's a lot of words, there's a lot of speaking, there's not close-up interaction, and that's only accessible to a certain proportion of the public. But if you're starting from a sensory kind of baseline when you're making work, it means that it's accessible for everyone, and you can build from there, and then you can include some language and things like that. Yeah, I mean, I kind of went off on a tangent there, but
absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. So Courtney, in terms of carbon theatre, are you trying to kind of bring the kind of sensory idea into more of your work and kind of apply it not just purely to what we would call sort of normal theatre, if you like, and kind of, or your classical theatre? Are you going to try to bring elements across all of the things that you get that carbon is involved with?
I think yes and no.
Yeah.
There are certain artists I work with that, don't work in the sensory field. It's not that we don't make whatever they make accessible, but it's probably not quite right for what they're trying to make or trying to do. But yeah, with Seagull, as Natalya mentioned, the show we kind of first started working on, that was a really big first project for me. It was an idea I had about doing theatre for young people. Like, the show was meant to be for kind of upper primary school age, but also making sure we had a really sensory show for everybody, but also had specific versions that kind of catered to really specific needs as well. So we ended up devising a tour that had a show with 3 versions, so that actually we could present it in a slightly different way to make it more accessible for a specific need, for example. So that was really where it started, and it's kind of stayed as a branch of carbon, if you like. So I work with different partners, for example. I work with different funders on this part of what I work to do, but this particular project has been something that I've kind of initiated, which is a slightly different way of working for me as well. It's not just, I read a play or I see a show and then start working with one particular artist on something, because that's, a brilliant part of my job as a producer, being really supportive to an artist and helping them create new work and really kind of develop and grow as a vision, as a person, as an artist. But it's nice to be able to work as well on really original projects and actually gather teams together and work with different people and yeah, try and make something from what I've dreamed up in my brain to try and make it real. And yeah, getting creatives involved in that has been really exciting, because ultimately everyone brings so much experience but also so much kind of creativity, and it's amazing to see something I've dreamed up in a funding application actually become real life. So it's been really rewarding and creative, and yeah, I hope it keeps growing and we can keep doing more and more sensory work and sensory projects.
That sounds great. It really does sound great. And having lots of different ideas, you kind of just that kind of melting pot, if you like, just kind of keeps growing. And you never quite know where that's going to go, which is great. Kind of jump a little bit in terms of the order that I wrote things down, but I just feel it kind of flows a little nicely. Talk about My Sensory Adventures and your latest project. So My Sensory, how did that kind of come about? Is it, like you said, just something that you guys have kind of thought of and wanted to do and kind of created?
Well, it actually started from the Seagull project that we spoke about. There was plans to take Seagull on the road to theatres, and then of course the pandemic happened and is still happening. And My Sensory Adventures is a response to that in a digital way. So it started from inspiration from Seagull, and we took some elements of sensory things that we'd done in that project and decided to bring them in more digitally and provide activities that people could do at home. I'm sure Courtney has lots more to say about that.
Yeah, it was a complete reroute because of the pandemic, really. So we had some funding in, luckily, before the pandemic struck, so we did have something to go off. I mean, the original plan was to do live activity with local families mainly, to try and build some regular activity, but also start building a relationship with people locally. I'm based quite rurally in the Midlands, so it's often a bit of a struggle, especially if we're working on tour and things, to actually start building a group of families or a group of people that would really enjoy doing what we're trying to do. So it was meant to be a start for that, really. But yeah, COVID meant that we had to make everything digital, which has been a real eye-opener, actually. I've really enjoyed making everything digital. I did some filming, which I had a starring role in because we couldn't get Natalya up to Northampton. So that's been interesting for everybody. But it has been really nice, actually, seeing how far the videos and things can reach, because obviously people don't have that extra bother of traveling or getting into a building and things like that. So it's been quite freeing in a way. But it has been very strange not working with the art centres that we were going to and having that kind of, I guess, circle of support around what we're trying to do as well. I think as independent companies and independent artists, we're so reliant seems to be the wrong word, but we have to work with a venue, we have to work with an art centre. I say that, we actually don't have to. We could just rock up in a community centre. But what I mean is, those venues and those art centres provide so much support. They're brilliant in what they do, and if they're really open to learning and everything as well, it can be such a valued partnership. So those basically disappeared overnight because everyone went on furlough and venues closed. So yeah, in a way it was quite liberating to do something completely independently without much support, but it really highlighted how much support those venues actually give us. I've gone off on a massive tangent about venues now. They're great, but they all closed and it's very sad. Hopefully they're going to reopen slowly as we get out of the pandemic, but it's given me more confidence to do things locally and actually work completely independently. And as part, we actually managed to get a little bit of extra funding during the pandemic from a local community fund, the Margaret Giffin Fund, which specifically supports kind of groups in Kettering and Corby and East Northants, which is where I am. So that enabled me to actually create physical packs of ingredients so that we could deliver them to local households. So that was an extra kind of added bonus, really, because we did all the digital stuff and it was a bit basically like, oh, that's all expensive. That's, you know, it's going to be wholly digital. But that little bit of extra funding enabled us to actually deliver to families. So that was, yeah, really great. And I think we've got about 30 families at the moment that have been receiving packs and things, which has been really exciting. I've seen some great photos and heard what they've been getting up to at home. And yeah, we've got about 10 more households to recruit into our sensory adventure team. But yeah, it's been really fun, but very different, and a lot of learning and a lot of working out problems, but it's been good.
Can I just add to that as well? I think working digitally has been a completely new experience, especially when it comes to sensory work, because the sensory work is so close up and tactile, and it's all about, you know, touch and think that all the things that we can't do at the minute. So working in this new way has been a challenge, but I feel like I've learnt so much. I agree with Courtney that it's been such a learning curve. But also the really great thing about what Courtney was saying about being able to deliver physical packs to people is that some artists and companies and venues have been producing this amazing digital work, but there's some families who don't have access to the digital world who may experience digital poverty. So one of the driving forces behind creating these physical packs is providing families who may not be able to access the digital content and give them the opportunity, or not give them the opportunity, so they can experience arts and the activities just the same as other people. It's been a massive learning curve.
Yeah, I think it's great, and it's something that I've spoken to a couple of different companies now, and they say the great thing that's come out of making things digital is this sudden reach of things that are markets and audiences they never thought would have been possible in, because they never would have done this originally. So I spoke to Polka Theatre in London last week, and they said they've got people in Italy like shouting them, going, oh, when's the next one? And they're like, well, we haven't done it yet, but that's an audience they would never have reached had they not digitally created things to go out, which is great. I just wonder if you could kind of tell us exactly what My Sensory Adventures is and what it is that you guys have created for people during the pandemic.
Yes, of course. So as Natalia said, it kind of stemmed out of Seagull, which was a show all about sailing around the world. So we did some development of that show way back in 2018, I think, 2019, beginning of 2019. And a lot of it was exploring things like the water and the beaches around the world, and different smells and textures from different parts of the world. And when obviously we had to digitalize everything and completely reroute what we were going to do this year, that was still a big inspiration. So we came up with a really simplified version, I guess, of that, which are the ancient elements. So the water, earth, wind and fire, and focused on doing activities for that. So for each theme we have 2 activities. We have one messy and taste safe activity and one non-messy activity, so it just gives people different options if they've got particular preferences over if they want to feel things, or if they don't like that kind of icky wet texture and things. It just gives you 2 very different ways of interacting with the theme. So 2 activities for each theme, and then also with each theme we've commissioned an original song, so that the idea is you create whatever activity you want to do, and then you can play the song as a kind of musical soundtrack to your exploration session, just to create a bit more of that kind of theatrical experience at home. Because I've done it. If I've made an activity at home, I kind of make it and then go, oh, that's that done then. Or I give it to my daughter who's nearly 3, but if I've ever done things at home with her, she goes, oh great, puts her fingers in it and then runs off to do something else. So it felt important to commission that music to actually create an event, if you like, at home, so it could be a little bit more special and help people get into the mood as well.
Yeah, like an atmosphere, you know, like when you go into the theatre, you go into a venue or a workshop, there's an atmosphere, so the music definitely helps to create that.
Yeah, and it's been good actually, because it's allowed me to work with people that aren't necessarily right on my doorstep. So Therese, who wrote these beautiful songs and performed them, and Canute, who arranged them and did all the production of it, they are 2 artists that I worked with, you know, quite a while ago now, and haven't really had a chance or a project to work with them since. So it's been really nice actually reconnecting with people that, you know, are perfect for for this kind of project. And yeah, that sense of actually travel isn't really a thing anymore, so we can't travel, so actually I can work with people wherever they are. So that's been quite nice as well, kind of reconnecting with people across the country.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think it is great, like you said, it's trying to create something that regardless of where you are, you can, and make it not just another lockdown activity. Not that I'm sure children by this point are probably quite somewhat tired of 9 months later after it all started. So you've kind of touched on it a bit, that you managed to get some funding and kind of sending these packs out to make sure that everyone had the opportunity to access this work. I was just wondering kind of what other things you've kind of done to make it as accessible as possible, and kind of, obviously there's certain restrictions to that, and you've touched on that there are 2 versions of each theme. I just wonder if there's anything else you kind of felt you've kind of focused on and really kind of made sure that it is as accessible as possible.
I think Natalya can probably answer that in much more detail than I will, so I'll hand over in a minute. But one thing was that we wanted to make sure that we were really clear that this sensory activities can be for anybody. I think actually when people think of sensory, they might have certain expectations of who that's for. So a lot of, especially digitally on things like Instagram and Pinterest and things, a lot of sensory is really focused on very, very young children, for example. And there's a whole, you know, audience out there for very, very young children. But we wanted to try and make it as open as possible. Actually, there's lots of people of all ages who can benefit and really enjoy sensory activities and sensory kind of sessions and items. So really making that as open as possible was a really big thing kind of moving into the project. And I'd say as well, now that we're kind of halfway through it, a lot of the immediate people wanting to engage were parents who had very young children. And as the project's kind of developed, and as we've kind of talked about it more or put out more information, that's really expanded. So we've got lots of people. I still want to do more work on sensory work for older people in particular, because I think, you know, I haven't actually had any older people sign up for this. And I think there is definitely a world where we do a sensory project really focused in on older people's experiences. But that was part of the reason we didn't have a story or a situation. So we just had activities and a song, so you can basically create your own tone as well. So it's not going to be, you know, overly babyish, or it's not going to be too linguistic, or so you can basically do all of that to create the best version of it yourself at home. Natalya, I'll let you talk about how we made it accessible, but that just came to my head, so I thought I'd share it with everyone.
Yeah, definitely. One of the key things that Courtney and I spoke about before we'd even planned it was, as Courtney said, making it for anyone who's a sensory being. And by sensory being, I mean anyone who experiences the world in a sensory way. So it regardless of age, regardless of all the things that Courtney's mentioned, basically. So yeah, that was a definite key thing for us. And as we spoke about earlier, when planning the activities, it was really important to provide options so that people who were engaging with this content had agency in what they were doing. So we weren't saying this is what you have to do. There was choice within the theme and the activity. In terms of accessibility digitally, all of our work is captioned, which is great. All videos online should be captioned for anyone who is listening. And the same with all the social media kind of content, and Courtney's website where all of the video content kind of lives. It's all put on there in a accessible way. The videos were put on multiple platforms. So the videos are uploaded to YouTube, aren't they? Or is it Vimeo? Yeah. So the videos are uploaded to an external kind of video service so that people can access them for free. I think that was a really key thing as well in terms of accessibility, making sure the activities were free for people, especially during a pandemic when finances are not, great for a lot of people. So providing that.
I think the biggest thing was the thing about not focusing in on a really specific group of people, making it really open to anybody that experiences the world in sensory ways. But and the big thing about the design of the activities was having those two options as well. The messy and taste safe was really important for anyone that likes to explore with their mouth, and likes to get stuck in with that really messy texture, I guess, and then having an option that isn't so all-encompassing, that isn't so icky sticky is the best way I can describe that, for anybody that doesn't like that sensory experience.
And also in terms of the materials we used, we definitely made sure, or we tried to make sure, that they were materials that you could either get at the corner shop, you didn't have to go out of your way to find, or you would have already in the house. And a lot of the stuff that we used was recycled things, like yogurt pots or little cups and things like that, in an effort to be sustainable as well with what we were making and producing, but also, as I say, to be accessible for anyone who was doing the content, so they didn't feel like, oh, I have to order this from online, or oh, I'm going to have to try and find this. We tried to make sure all of the materials are things you could kind of easily source.
And we didn't really cover allergies as much, because you can't assume every allergy in the country and give options, but we were really conscious about allergies as well, particularly if they're all food based and taste safe. So Helen, who's the other one of our sensory presenters, with myself, Helen is actually a professional actor, so her videos are much better than mine, but she has various allergies, so actually that was really useful, because she was like, well, you can use this or this or this if you have a dairy allergy, or if you have something else. So I mean, we did give a heads up on allergies and give a few options, but that's something that if we were doing it in person, we would have to be much more actively aware of, so that actually we had those options available, and we asked people what their allergies were before they came, so we could accommodate them. But as I say, digitally, people can personalize it a lot more to themselves, because they're doing it all in their own space, in their own time, using their own things, unless they're getting a free pack, obviously. It is a lot more effort on them. So just basically trying to make it as easy to do and as clear and concise as possible, so that people enjoy doing it and don't think of it as a kind of a really complicated task as well.
Yeah, and I think the other thing in terms of accessibility is putting the videos online and not doing Zoom sessions or video call sessions at certain times, because for a lot of people that's not accessible, because some people are caring for another family member or friend or relative at home, and they can't just have a designated time where we say, oh, at this time we're going to be running this workshop. It just doesn't work for a lot of people, for various reasons. So putting them online just allows people to interact with the content in their own time, in their own space, whenever they feel comfortable to.
Yeah, which is great. And you've touched on a lot of what seem like really simple things that to a lot of people don't seem like a problem, but having that complete flexibility to have your own control over what's happening, what's going on, when you do it, is just really simple things that make things a huge difference to some people, which is great. And it's great that you guys have managed to essentially adapt it all to still be able to deliver it in the pandemic. Do you feel that it's been as successful or more so successful because it's ended up being online and kind of in people's own homes, as to say if it was in all the art centres and community centres that you otherwise would have gone to?
Yeah, I think success is a funny thing, in like how you judge that, but
yeah,
it's definitely turned into something completely different. And I mean, the great thing about having things like digital videos, for example, is that they don't disappear. I think that's been the big learn from, especially because I predominantly work in theatre, is that, you know, we're so used as theatre makers to making something, spending years making things that then are performed for a limited number of days and disappear, and that's it.
yeah.
Like, it's really, really strange thinking back now on that. So yeah, it's been lovely having those videos, because obviously they'll last forever, hopefully.
Yeah, and just linking that back to accessibility, it allows people to go back and experience it again and again. For those people who enjoy and need repetition of activities, it's way more accessible than going to the theatre or doing an activity once and then that's it. I think it has a longer lasting impact. I hope, anyway.
Yeah, that's so true, actually, because a big thing that came out of our development period, actually, we were at the Edinburgh Arts Centre, who have a brilliant children in need funded programme for young people with complex needs, and we had lots of families in one morning. We did loads of activities and, you know, asked loads of questions and got loads of information about how we could move forward and, you know, make a valuable show, make a really great show. And one of the things they said is, actually, you know, we spend 45 minutes doing this wonderful thing and then it's done. Like, what's next? What do we do? And also, we were particularly, one of the shows, for example, was specifically for children with profound and multiple learning disabilities, and that particular show was, you know, I think we only had about 6 children planned to be in the show, with their families, obviously with their parents or carers, and it's you know, it's a very intimate show. There's room for one-to-one interactions and things like that, but that is, as a show to tour, obviously it's a lot more difficult financially, because you don't have that ticket sale income or anything, because there's a limited number of people. So where am I going with this? I don't know. It's yeah, it's just it has difficulties in touring that kind of work anyway.
I think it's more difficulties getting programmed, because a lot of theatres are reluctant to program the work, even though they should, because it's great and accessible and appeals to lots of people. I mean, it's necessary, but they're reluctant to program it because, like Courtney said, it doesn't produce a massive financial income. So yeah, I think the difficulty is getting programmed. It's great when you get to take stuff to venues. It is great because you get to connect with people, but actually getting programmed and convincing venues and art centres to program the work is the struggle, I think.
Yeah, that's so true, and actually that is on point with where I was going, and I forgot where I was going. But it's also that fact of, actually, you know, because that's really specific as well, it tends to get kind of niched in terms of a programmer's diary. They'll go, oh yeah, we've got one show for children under 5, we've got one show for children with PMLD, we've got one show for this, and actually it becomes a little bit limited. Do you know what I mean? It just it falls into specific slots, maybe, and actually there's no wiggle room, or there's no kind of flexibility around that. And realistically, if you've got a child with complex needs, if you've got you know, a tiny baby, or, you know, if just one show in 9 months of programming is not enough, really. If you enjoy those experiences, you want more. So I think, you know, if we can, we'll never go back to just doing live experiences, because, you know, we do live in a digital world. Why aren't we using it? Oh, because it's really expensive, and you know, fundraising is really difficult. But I think, you know, I mean, one of the good things to come out of this really radical change of way we've been working has been that, you know, live performance and digital can work really closely together to actually enhance the experience, rather than it being a kind of competition between the two. We can be really clever about how we're using it, and how we're using technology to not only be more accessible, but actually to be more interesting, and to make our work last longer.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think, and yeah, it is a weird kind of competition that it's become between online shows and delivery, between being in the room and in the performance. And I think you're hit the nail on the head when someone's got an artistic program to put together and they go, right, I've ticked this box, that's that show done. I've ticked this box, there's that show done. When actually what you're potentially offering would tick many more than just the one box. The sensory, as you said earlier, we're all sensory beings, so therefore it in some way can appeal to everyone, regardless of your needs of around anything, really.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think my dream of a venue is that we have like a whole sensory room that's just open all the time, and, you know, is full-time staffed, so that different things can happen every day, and it'd be great. Like that's a dream for my venue I open in 2085 or something. But that'll be how long it'll take me to get the funding together. But yeah, I think we need to be more innovative in terms of, you know, how we're connecting with audiences, and people online, because as I'm repeating myself now, but one show a year is not enough. And, you know, thinking about what we're doing for those people when we're not doing things actually in person is really important.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to acknowledge that there are companies and theatre companies and freelancers and individuals that have been doing this for a really long time before the pandemic as well. Digital work isn't new, and to pretend that it is kind of doing a massive disservice to all the people who have put in the groundwork before we started doing this. And I think it deserves way more credit than it's due. That we're doing in the new year is running sessions over the phone or on Zoom, depending on people's need, for parents and carers or adults who are interested in providing sensory experiences at home or in residential settings that they work in. And I think it's really exciting, because then you're handing power back over to the community to create and produce work or theatrical or artistic experiences for a lot of the time people who aren't engaged with theatre and the arts feel excluded, because it feels like a very exclusive sector. And to work with and work alongside parents and carers to make them feel more confident and empowered so that they can create these experiences for themselves and the people that they care for is really exciting.
That's great.
That was a tangent.
That's all right. No, it's great. And I think great tangent. Like I said, tangents are absolutely encouraged, because you still make a really good point that actually if people can take control over what they experience and what they're involved in, I think they're much more likely to be able to or want to be involved in that and kind of take advantage of things that you guys are offering. So I think that's a really good point from that. So my kind of last kind of question really is how things are looking into the new year for you guys. I know that's a horrible question right now because no one quite knows what's going on, but in terms of your work and the kind of future that you hope that this might lead on to and kind of where it could go, would you look to do it in person in the future if it carries on being for you guys?
Yeah, I think we definitely want to still do what we've been doing digitally and with the packs. Like, as I say, oh, I don't know if I have said. Anyway, the project ends in January. That's our last theme being released. It's Fire, which is very exciting. It's my favourite one, so I'm excited for that. But yeah, so after January, it'll be a big kind of reflective post-project moment to then get all the fundraising to do it all again, but better and wider. Because we've started to provide activities for these households, and we want to continue to work with them and continue to grow what we're doing, but also they're all local as well. So actually, when we can safely do things in person, then it would be really great to start combining those two things, to have digital and to have live events kind of complementing each other. So that's definitely the plan kind of moving forward, dependent on funding.
Delivery ourselves, but if you guys had a dream show, gig, event that you could be involved with, that you could produce.
Courtney's already said hers. You can say it again while I think.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually thought of a different one. So I have my dream venue, but also I mean, Seagirl is the big thing that never happened, which is really, really sad for me. I spent a whole year fundraising and booking this tour that just disappeared. So it's very sad. But we've been having really early conversations with all the people involved about how we can make it happen out of the pandemic and everything else. And, we have come up with a really good idea, which combines decision-making technology, animation, live performance, and sensory work. So it's absolutely epic. And my producer brain just goes, oh my gosh, that budget's going to be huge and, really scary. And yeah, who's going to fund me? But, that's what I'm going to try and work out and try and get to happen, because I think, we've got a really good idea and I think it would be wonderful. So yeah, I guess my dream show to make happen would be that one in its new hybrid digital form.
I think mine is not super specific, but I would love for large, well-known venues to program more up. If more and more theatres would program this type of work, that's the dream.
Yeah, or more larger profile theatres would use their heavyweight status to actually support sensory companies, whether it's using different spaces in the building even, or to support independent companies.
Reach of that for you. Our second to last question is probably the most random one, and stems from a conversation I had on tour a few months ago. And it was something that was a little bit news to me, but everyone seems to have a go-to post-show or post-event snack, or something that just after a show, that's just what you're like, I just need this. It's just what I need. And what is that for you guys?
A nap.
Love it.
No, I'm joking. Usually something sugary, usually like fizzy drink or something. I don't know if that counts as a snack.
No, that's been a common theme. I've had a couple of people kind of go, like ice cold can of Coke.
I think it's to do with like the adrenaline and the stress finally kind of, and then you just need like a sugary fizzy drink or something to,
I mean, I don't perform anymore. Lucky for everybody. And luckily, sometimes I'm there for Get Out, sometimes I'm not. But I remember a lot of time. I used to work at the Fimbra way ago, 5 years ago probably. And they had really good pizzas from next door that we used to eat a lot of the time if we were there for a long time. So those pizzas have lovely fringy memories for me. But when I did perform, I was a tour guide for a long time when I lived in Edinburgh and in London when I moved down to London. But I had a really Natalia, I am going to confess to my to my awful snack. But there was a fish and chip shop opposite where I used to do touring, and if I was particularly on the late shift, I used to come out at like 10:30 at night. I'd nip over and get a battered cheeseburger. It was really good.
Love that.
And yeah, it was just what I needed at 10:30 after like 9 hours of tour guiding. But yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, having lived in Edinburgh, I mean, you can just about get a battered anything if you really want it. So yeah,
so good.
It's one of those, but that's grand. And our final question, definitely trying to end on kind of a positive note, and it's a little bit, could be a little bit deep, and I don't mind if you need a few seconds to think about it. That's fine. But for you, what is the one piece of advice you wish you'd been given when you first started out? That one thing that you know now that would have probably made your life a lot easier if you'd have known it at 17, 18, when you first when you were first starting out in your career?
I think mine would be just do it, like just do the project that you want to do, or just apply for the funding. Just email that person for a chat. Just don't be scared. Just go and do it. Put yourself out there. And also, I mean, sometimes you have to take no for an answer, but when it comes to like, you know, things like, don't take no for an answer always. Like, and know, trust your capability. Actually, I think that's the one. Trust your capability. Trust that you have the knowledge, and just trust that people are working with you because they want to work with you because you're good at what you do. That's the one.
Yeah.
Someone still needs to tell me that now. So
yeah, that's so true. I think part of getting a project off the ground is actually believing that you can do it and working everything else out later, because yeah, it's, you know, you can do some really good planning obviously, but you can't foresee everything. You've got to have confidence that you can actually do it, which is the biggest thing, I think. I don't know. I don't know what my advice to myself would be. It's really difficult because every time you make a mistake, you learn so much from it that, you know, I wouldn't want to advise myself before I've made that mistake, because I probably wouldn't learn from it. But I suppose the big one is never trim your budget before you put the funding application in. It's just not worth it. Like, ask for what you need. Ultimately, like, if you slim down a budget to try and make it more attractive to funders, or like you're really worried about value for money and things, like, don't do it. Don't pay yourself £80 a day. It's not right. Like, that would be my big thing. It would be, don't trim your budget before you put the funding application in. If anything, make it slightly more luxurious. But that's a big thing, because ultimately, like, if you don't apply for the money and you don't get the money that you need, then even though you've got funding and it's a wonderful thing, the project is not going to be as good as it could be. So yeah, write that budget how you want it to be.
Add a contingency.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great couple of bits of advice to end on there, guys. It's been really nice chatting to you. It has been really great. And yeah, I think best of luck with everything going forward. We will obviously shout out all of the links and everything to My Sensory Adventure and to Carbon as well.
Lovely.
Thank you so much.
No worries at all. Thank you very much, guys. Have yourselves a good day.
Cheers.
You too.
Thank you for listening to the Stage Is Yours podcast. Want to know more? Then head over to all of our socials. You can find us at Stage Is Yours Pod, where you can catch a cheeky glimpse at some of our upcoming guests, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to make sure that you never miss an episode. This has been the Stage Is Yours podcast, talking all things theatre and events. Until next time.